I probably should talk. I don't know. We'll see what we end up talking about. Maybe it will be about my childhood. I hope not.
Great. I think we're recording now. And we've got some folks watching. Hi, I'm Brianne Barrett. I'm the interim associate artistic director of Theater Exile. Folks are still joining, but I just wanted to say that we're sitting here for a little bit with Liz Filios and Evelyn Shuker while we wait for more people to come in. And then we're gonna start talking about this pivot from stage to screen, a very unique experience for me, myself, definitely, and I believe also Liz and Evelyn. Yeah, we'll talk about some of the specific things that we're working on to bring DPAD to everyone, which is Theater Exile's first show in our 2021 season. That's 2020, 2021, not just 2021. It's very confusing time. Thank you. So yeah. I think I'll just give it a couple more minutes before we do proper introductions. But in the meantime, we're here. Possibly could have been playing some music. I don't know why I didn't think about that.
I can play some music.
Evelyn can play some music for us while we wait for just a couple more minutes. What do you got, Evelyn?
This is my favorite local artist right now, Nina Keith. Makes these really beautiful ambient.
Yes.
I'm gonna. Oh no, I can't share. I can't screen share. I don't have permissions.
That's okay. It's cool. Next time we will consider some music, and it would be lovely if you shared that music with us, Evelyn, and then hopefully that can be what we share.
I'd like to know about Nina Keith now, though.
Yeah.
Nina Keith is amazing. I love her work. Highly recommended.
And that's a local artist in Philadelphia?
Yeah, local Philadelphia, experimental composer.
I've been really into this local artist named Joy Ike. Have either of you heard of Joy Ike yet?
No.
Really beautiful singer-songwriter based in West Philly. Has been doing some outdoor concerts here and there. She has some really inspiring, just powerful messages encoded.
How do you spell Ike?
Just I-K-E.
I-K-E. Thank you.
Amazing. I love the artist sharing that's happening here. It's one of the really awesome things about being in Philadelphia is that there is a lot of like promotion within the community to bring people more and more together. So as we each like find artists, we want to share them with our other artist friends, which is really great. And something that because I'm from a place where like a community of artists doesn't seem as like prolific. It's or not prolific, but there isn't a bringing together of artists in the same way. It feels like factions all over the place. But Philly really likes to draw people in. Like if I know you're a photographer, I really want to know like if you're interested in doing lighting. Is that something you play around with? Like we always want to kind of tease out other skills of like artists and their many different facets. Liz Filios being an incredible singer, like, what do you do with sound, Liz? Like, let's tease out what you do when you're playing with instruments. Can you create a score for a show, or do you want to like play around and see if you can create these like sounds that emulate different moments that we recognize? And can you basically create like opening a door with like the strings of your cello or something? And so there's something really fun with teasing out what people can do with like their knowledge base that may not be immediately what they think of themselves as. So yeah, but I'm gonna use that as an interesting little pivot to talk about pivoting, because the thing that we're doing right now is we are taking the skill sets that you take into a theater and put onto a stage and reshaping them to use them for this different medium. So in a similar way that we're doing that with individual artists, we're doing that with whole productions. So here we are moving into this season of uncertainty and trying to challenge our creativity. And in what can feel, or at least for me, felt daunting at first, and now is just very exhilarating. So yeah, I open it up to Evelyn and Liz to first introduce yourselves and what your position is in relation to this discussion. Also, if you want to add all of your hyphenates, please feel free. I'm sure that everyone would love to know all of the many different talents that you each have.
Okay, I'll go first. My name is Evelyn Shuker. I also go by Swift. I am the production manager for DPAD and Theater Exile. This is my first time as a production manager. I'm also moving into a new role. I've been a master electrician a lot, doing a lot of lighting, both design and technician work. And then in the other world, I'm a writer and a performance artist. So I've been doing some of that work, although all of what I've been doing for DPAD specifically has been in sort of creating the technical environment in which we can have this show.
And I'm Liz, and I am sound designing and composing for DPAD. And as Bree mentioned, I came into sound design, I guess, in the back door, so to speak. I was working as a performer, and these needs started to arise within the production where they wanted live sound on stage. And so sometimes that was just a song in a transition. Sometimes that was picking up an instrument to accompany a moment. Sometimes that was found objects that could create sounds, or building entire Foley designs for a production. And it was all in a live theatrical kind of performative space. And so in this capacity, my pivot is to explore how to take those and, as Bree mentioned, shape them into something that can exist in this other realm. So finding ways to use the aliveness, but now working through a digital medium.
Awesome. And just to reiterate, I'm the interim associate artistic director at Theater Exile. My name is Brianne Barrett, and I am also the director of DPAD, our first show. And yeah, so it's strange. I've been familiar with DPAD for years now. I directed the first reading of it at Theater Exile back in 2015. And it's definitely taken some new shape. If we're going to continue on this journey of reshaping, it's taken new shape as the years have gone on. But most specifically for this experience, Jeremy Gable, the playwright, reimagined some of the moments so that it would fit in this space where people can be isolated and interact digitally. And so going from my experience of knowing the script and knowing that we would be presenting in this new form, it's been fascinating to like try and reshift my brain to think about theater in terms of digital presentation without it going into a different mode of digital presentation, such as TV or film or something like that, that we're still keeping the real-time experience and authenticity factor into the experience that you get when you go into theater. I've been working with these two amazing people to make this happen. And I just wanted to kind of open the floor so that we can have a discussion around what we've been experiencing. Evelyn has been exploring all of the different ways to connect us all as we're trying to piece together our different our different ideas and talents, that being the cast and the writing and the designers. Each of the designers are working separately. Usually we're bringing all this together and seeing how it all mixes. And instead we have to do that digitally. And so Evelyn's been amazing in trying to connect us all and identify what we need technically to make it all function properly. And Liz is readjusting how she's considering what we need for sound. Usually we're talking about speaker placements, and right now we're talking about mics and how much they'll pick up and how we like focus them on the actors, as well as like making sure that there's this design that people are hearing and not thinking of as just digital, but ethereal, and you can still feel it around you the same way you might if you were in a space. Do you two want to talk about that? It doesn't have to be one by one. We can actually all be unmuted and just chat.
Heck yeah, love being unmuted.
Great, yeah.
Yeah, one of those sort of big challenges that I've been trying to figure out is, generally speaking, my favorite part of any show is tech. I love tech. It makes me really happy. There's something that's really wonderful about a large number of people all sitting down in the dark together for a really extended period of time and trying as hard as they can to make art in a joint way, and like trying to go down to really fine granular details of making everything sort of beautiful and crisp and clean. Which is, and I'm trying to figure out a way to make that happen in a world that's mediated by technology instead of actually being able to have everybody in a dark room, because dark rooms are deadly now. So what we're ending up using right now is the primary way that we'll be interacting is I've built out this Discord server. I don't know how many of the people who are watching know about Discord or have used it. It's similar. This thing that it's closest to is probably Slack, but it also has these sort of like a bunch of different voice channels that you can kind of jump between. So we've built out this server which has like, this is the place which is the stage, here is the backstage area, here's the tech table, so we can be moving from room to room and talk to different people who are in those locations to kind of recreating the layout of a theater but like in different rooms in this Discord server. And we're building out this relatively complex array of different pieces of technology in order to try to make it so that the actors can be interacting with each other in as like simple and unmediated a way as possible, while also trying to capture really like clean and professional quality audio and video. So their signal is being saved, like their video and audio is going to be saved locally and also sent to our programmer, who's going to be like synthesizing all four of everyone's feeds together into this program called OBS, which we'll then be sort of using to add animations to, and add non-diegetic sound to, and make sort of potential like light change overlays and filters. And then that's being output to a stream, but the actors aren't seeing the stream, the actors are only seeing each other, and that sort of the other tech elements are being laid in after the fact. And then after that's over, sort of after tech is done and we've made this show, then we're giving it to an editor to come in and sort of like clean up around the edges and sort of get it really like tight and neat and make all the transitions perfect. And if there's like lag in someone's internet connection, sort of like replacing that with higher quality footage that we've been saving locally. So we're building this relatively complex technology infrastructure in the service of trying to make it so that the actors are interacting with each other in as simple a way as possible.
To try and
oh, sorry, Liz, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, to try and imitate life, to try and like create that sensation of all of us being in that dark space together, where we try to make something together.
Yeah, and ultimately to create something that's going to be a valuable experience for the audience, that is telling the story with the momentum that they would feel in a theater space. Yeah, it is a vast project that Evelyn is helming, and beautifully. Yeah, Liz, do you want to comment at all about like shifting your mindset around design?
Sure. I mean, one of the things that I've been thinking about is that when we're in a live theatrical setting, we talk a lot about focus in terms of like where we want the audience to look and see and hear and experience things from. You talked about speaker placement, and that's part of focus too, you know, or even like where an actor is looking on stage tells the audience where to look. And we have to be very, very intentional about telling a group of people that are in one large space what we want them to see and pay attention to and hone in their vision. And we can control that environment in terms of audio in a very specific way. And it feels that in some ways, what we're working through now is almost the opposite, because when we're working with cameras, it's very easy to control what the audience is looking at. We're just like, look here. And that's what they will see. We can even close up, you know, like we can get very, very intimate, and we can allow access to the details of an actor's performance in a very, very detailed and deliberate way. But when it comes to the sound focus, I am not able to immerse people in a soundscape where I can say, you're going to hear something coming from over here, you know, and then I'm going to like tune this instrument so that the frequencies are going to vibrate in such a way that it, you know, it will come to you from here, and you can be immersed in that environment. Instead, all of your sound is probably going to be coming from one source when you experience this. So in a way, now I'm trying to negotiate that dilemma that usually has to be worked through visually on stage. Now I have to find an audio way to kind of like say, well, it's all coming from one place, so I have to teach you where to look, where to listen. And so for me, that has become a really wonderful and rich dialogue with you, Bree, in terms of the textures and the tones and the layers of sound that we choose. We've talked a lot about dissonance, and we've talked a lot about finding ways to create tension, but not falling into cinematic tropes. Like, for example, I sent you some samples and we were like, oh no, this sounds too Hitchcockian, if that's a word. So like, how do we create tension without making this suspenseful? Because there are so many tropes in cinematic scoring. There's a very distinct kind of coded language. Like if you hear this kind of drum, then it means there's going to be a battle, you know, like if you hear this kind of string section, then you know there's going to be romance or somebody's about to cry. And I find that cinematic scores can be kind of heavy-handed and manipulative. I mean,
Yeah.
some of them are brilliant. Some of them are truly incredible. And they like, those are the iconic ones that we always listen to over and over. You hear the theme and you think of that scene in the movie and how much it moved you. But there are also some of the new Marvel movies where I go, come on, guys, like I get it already. and I think that that's been one of the things that Bree, you and I have been really working through is like, when you first approached me about this project, I think one of the reasons that I was even considered for the job was because of this job that I had been doing beforehand of Foley art and you know, sound touring, where I was exploring certain sound sources and trying to like kind of crack them open and imagine what else they could be. Is it okay if I talk about the sound tour for 1 second?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Well, this has just sort of been like a hobby of mine for years, is finding acoustically interesting places in Philadelphia. And so these sites have become like a tour. And I had the opportunity to take Bree and Jeremy on a sound tour. And we just walked around Old City. And I was like, stand here, like right here in this place. Now face this wall and speak. And you'll feel the sound come back to you in a certain way. Or, you know, there will be an echo, or you'll be able to stand far apart and talk to someone who's very, very far away at a whisper. And so I think that in a way, this is a new kind of sound tour that we're all doing together. And it's not just sound, it's lighting, it's everything, where we're forced to sort of like find these resources that we never thought that we would be turning to make our art and exercise our craft and go like, can we make something with this? Because we're all still artists, even if it is a pandemic, we all still want to be together and connect and make things. And now we've been given this opportunity, but we just have to be a little bit resourceful in the ways that we turn to our tools.
I think one of the things that, so I was a film minor in college, and this is the closest I've ever come to like utilizing some of that knowledge since college. And one of the things that was always a clear distinction is like how close you are. And so you have to be like a lot more purposeful about how somebody uses their body language, or how the lighting is affecting every bit of the mise-en-scene. So like one of the things that I have to clock here more than I might have to with a stage production is the fact that my light keeps reflecting off of my glasses. You have so much aesthetic distance, the distance between the audience and the stage when you're in a theater, that some of these things you can mask. Some of these things are a little bit easier to hide. And so as we're moving into the screen element, as Liz was pointing out, there's so much detail. And we have to be a lot more considerate of this closeness that we have with the screen. And the way I've been thinking about it is like when you're in a black box of a theater, like those spaces that everyone gets super excited about because you're talking about how intimate the play is, you know, like you're right up next to the person. And so I really have been wanting to treat this with that kind of regard versus the lens being the audience. I think it's really easy to get lost in the lens as the audience versus your audience is a person who is watching. And so that's been a distinction that I keep in my mind as we move forward. And I think it's a distinction that Theater Exile has been considering as we have, like ultimately as we have to make this shift because of the circumstances of the world, while we still desperately want to tell stories. And so, as Liz was pointing out, we're all artists and we want to connect, and we still want to create. Um, and this is part of something that's been really fascinating about this process for me, is like, how are we still keeping to our heart as theater artists, while acknowledging that this medium has been well established. The idea of a camera as filter is a medium that exists in different ways. And so what I like about what Evelyn was talking about in this Discord program that we'll be using, and breaking it up as though it were tech, like actually putting people in different sections, like they were in different sections of the theater, to do tech, really just helps us continue to, for me, and I think I'm interpreting what you both are saying, it's keeping us aligned with our theatrical experiences and how we're trying to translate this work into a different function, not necessarily a different storytelling. It's the same storytelling, just functionally different. Does that feel right? Am I picking up what you're putting down?
Yeah, I think that like a lot of my role as a production manager is sort of facilitating trying to give people an environment in which they can feel excited to and able to do their craft. So the goal that I have, because the designers that we've hired for the most part are theatrical designers. Like, we didn't hire a lighting designer who primarily worked in doing like film and television sets. We hired Amanda Jensen, who's a brilliant, beautiful theatrical designer. So I've viewed as my role is to try to create the space in which they can work without having to sort of like be constantly thinking about mediating their the way that they think about their craft. So that's why I was like building the Discord like that, and that's why sort of I've been trying to. It's a big jump for everybody. Everybody's learning new skills and sort of trying to do something different, and I don't exactly know the right way to say this. I'm just going to talk about Amanda specifically. Like, because Amanda is a theatrical lighting designer, she will be able to do the best art in an environment which holds that process that she has learned and mastered. So instead of trying to sort of like throw her into the deep end of, oh, actually, suddenly you're a film and television lighting designer now you have to learn sort of the protocols, technical skills, new technical language, and workflow of a different media with a bunch of different technicians who were raised and taught to interact with time and the environment and the way that actors work in a fundamentally different way, rather sort of attempting to give as close to the environment that she is used to. I don't know why I'm talking about Amanda specifically. I was just talking with her earlier today, so she's on my mind. But like give like, if she's a plant, give her the kind of sunlight she's used to growing with, instead of like throwing her into a totally different kind of UV light and be like, hey, make it work. Because like, she's not going to work as well in that kind of environment, because that's not the craft that she built. I don't know. I think that a lot of, especially sort of that more technical art is, which I view design as being sort of a relatively technical art. You have to be in an environment in which you can work. I've been struck. I come from a lighting background, and how much of lighting design is choosing a bunch of numbers correctly and just being really thoughtful about what numbers you're using. That, like, if you look at a sort of a light board for a conventional theatrical show, what you'll see is this really large array of like, here are a bunch of numbers grouped by 5, and then underneath each of those numbers is a number between 0 and 100, and then next to it is a number between 0 and 256. Like, it's it's this extremely technical process. It's like you're taking something like abstract, like beauty, and putting it into ones and zeros on a piece, on like a computer screen. So if somebody is going to make art well, we need to give them, at least have the first part of that algorithm be as close to the same as possible. I don't know if that made sense.
Not only does it make sense, but it's an art in itself, what you do, Evelyn. And I don't think that most people think about that as being its own craft, and that the other crafts couldn't exist without it. But it's really beautiful.
Thank you.
Describe.
Thanks, Liz.
I have a question for you, Bree.
Okay.
Because you were talking about how during this process, our theatrical craft gets closer, everything gets close up. And I think that under a microscope, sometimes theatrical craft feels like a caricature. It feels very big. I know for myself, singing in front of a large audience as opposed to into a microphone in a recording booth is a very, very different thing. And this, singing one way in the other setting just won't fly. And for me, I think that this is true of all of the aspects of the show, including the text. And I think that language that people will accept on stage is not necessarily language that will fly on a screen for whatever reason. And I think that Jeremy has done a really amazing job of creating language that transmits in a close-up setting, and it feels just as natural and appropriate when I imagine it on stage as it does in a virtual realm. But I know that he created an entirely new version of the show just for this production. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that. And also because in your capacity as an artistic associate, you are, a part of trying to understand what's going to work in a season. And so trying to understand how this play was going to work in this particular season. What was that process like?
Long. No, that's okay. The last conversation that we did, for anyone who happened to have caught Deborah and I talking about the season in general, talking about D-Pad, Sin Eaters, and Passover, we talked a little bit about the process with which we went through to pick the plays, because this is such a unique season and we were looking for plays that had an adaptability quality to them, to be digital or to be outside, that didn't necessarily have to be in a theater. And so we have been considering D-Pad. It was on a short list since we did the reading 5 years ago, and it just never quite met its moment for many different reasons. Each season it was a little bit different as to why it wasn't quite right. But the story that it's telling and the isolation that the main character it kind of creates for herself was something that could be utilized through this medium. Or not, this medium could be utilized to tell that story, is more what I was trying to say. And I think that there are elements to the dialogue that Jeremy adjusted that is highlighting that isolation more, acknowledging the separation of actual human to human connection, and also what effort it takes to try and manifest that human to human connection when all you have is digital space, without it being a COVID play. It's not a COVID play. It is a play in which the function of how they interact because of their world and their lifestyles is digital. That's it's choice more than necessity. And I think but it still gives us that conversation about how do we form real connection if this is the only way that we can connect. And so I think Jeremy really did a good job of trying to build that in. And yet I still feel like you put this play on a stage, it could work. I know he has a stage version of it, but I think this virtual edition could still play really well on a stage. It's kind of the opposite of a lot of the other plays we've been looking at, right? A lot of people have been looking at where it's like, oh, I have this play. In fact, our play Sin Eaters that we'll be doing we're doing the play. It wasn't a Justin anyway, but I still think it'll read very well in a digital space. But that's, I think, what a lot of other people were looking at were plays that can this exist in a virtual space? Whereas Jeremy adapted this for us, and I'm reading this virtual space, like virtual edition, and I'm like, but I would love to play with this in a space, in like a theater space too, and see what happens. So it's a little weird to like look at it in reverse, but nevertheless, at the end of the day, it's about intimacy for me. And the play is building intimacy through isolation, which is very fascinating. And how close we are, and the details of things are useful. And if this play were live, if we were all able to gather, I wonder if it would get lost in a big space. We would still want something that's small and intimate. I grew up in a theater company that was very small, very intimate. I think at most we were ever able to fit 40 people, and that was us throwing in a lot of extra seats. But like being that close to each other, the details were so important, and it wasn't, but you still were able to kind of look wherever you wanted. You still had that flexibility that theater gives you, but it was tight, it was intimate. And I want to treat the virtual edition of this play with that same intimacy, without feeling like I'm only doing it because a camera is so close, that I'm doing it because that's the truth of the play. I hope I'm successful at that. And then like Matt is going to do something really interesting and unique with Sin Eaters, and have to like face a lot of these same questions of how are we taking this play and putting it into the digital space. And Evelyn will work on that one as well and create an awesome little, like not little, big, massive infrastructure for us all to use. We're just DPAD's the first in our season, and so I kind of feel like I'm the guinea pig, and there's a freedom to that I'm having a lot of fun with. So yeah, there's that. I don't know if I fully answered your question, Liz, but I think Jeremy adjusted the play with a lot of thoughtfulness to just meet the necessity of talking about isolation, through for like never losing that theme in the play. Yeah. I rambled. I'm a rambler.
I love it when you ramble.
Yeah, Evelyn, I am curious now that I'm thinking about like how this isn't going to be the only time we're doing this season. How you're feeling about like what you can take to the next play versus what is unique to DPAD.
Well, how much am I allowed to talk about the internal conversations we've had about Sin Eaters? I'm gonna be frank. So that
okay.
I'm gonna be open. We were me and Deb were having a conversation about one of Matt's interests, which is to have all of the cameras in the show in Sin Eaters be in the world, be cameras that would exist in the world of these people's house, so that some shots are like shot as though on a phone, some shots are shot like as a nanny cam or a security camera footage. There's like video doorbells, but that's so each individual shot in the film, and that he's considering shooting this one a little bit more as a film, but each individual shot exists as a diegetic real camera within the structure, within the fiction of the show. We might actually shoot it with our real cameras and then like edit it in post to make it look like a nanny cam, because there's a lot of good reasons to make that kind of deception. But one of the things that I thought was interesting is that, and I think this is just an interesting thing that I've noticed about the way that theatrical artists come at making film. Because like there's a level to which like this is a play and there's a level to which this is a movie. Like we're going to have a .m4a file that we're going to upload to a website and people are going to watch it. Like in that sense, it is a movie. But that both you, Brie, and Matt are very concerned about these notions of purity and authenticity. And I remember from our first conversation, you were very like clear about wanting a single 90-minute take, that like we don't shoot for cuts, we don't shoot close-ups and then reverse shots. We do the show once and get all of our material from a single long 90-minute take. And like in the cinema world, that's like the concept of a art film, right? You know, like how there's like Birdman's only one cut, but they like faked it to make it one cut. Then you like imagine someone else being like, oh, I saw this movie that's 90 minutes and it's all one take, and people would be like, oh shit, that's crazy. But that's sort of that was not even like, that's not the gimmick of this show. That's just sort of the way that you were approaching it as a theater artist, because everything that you do is one take. And that's sort of that the way that Matt is approaching the other thing is that like we need to have this level of authenticity within the structure of the show, because like when you were talking earlier about sort of acting for the lens, or sort of like believing that a lens exists, that's the sort of fundamental idea of cinema, is that there is a lens, it is the viewer's eye. People have cinema people have opinions about the lens, but that Matt is also wanting this sort of purity and authenticity of removing the lens as an extra diegetic object, and having everything exist within the fiction of the story. So I think that it's interesting that when theater artists come to make film, they come with these ideas that seem like they'd be like avant-garde student filmy ideas in the cinema world, but that are just sort of like very specific and not even like questioned or thought of as like, this is a crazy thing that we're going to be doing. It's just like, no, we need to tell this way because that's the story. I just thought it's interesting the way that people like end up at this sort of like hyper experimental thing by trying to move from one medium to another. So that's what I've been thinking about a lot.
Fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah. I really hear you on that too, because I know those conversations of like, yeah, that long take in Children of Men, it's so amazing. It's like, I'm about to embark on 90-minute long take, bitches.
That long take in Children of Men is legitimately amazing.
It is amazing. So good.
That's so cool. Love the Children of Men take.
No, it is incredible. And I mean, there's also just like the skill with which to pull off a one take in a film just is so monumentous. Because there's so much more in the space, because they are trying to extend the world so much further beyond just the story, which is what we're not doing. Because as theater artists, what we're doing is we squeeze the story into this one, like into the small space around that main character or those main characters. And so I think for Matt and I, but just based on what you're sharing, is that what we're trying to do is stick with the the micro of what we're sharing, instead of trying to extend beyond and build these much grander worlds that our characters, our story is like in. Like we want to stay encapsulated in this little bubble of the characters that we're sharing with people, which requires really thoughtful design from designers like Liz and Amanda, and we have Colin Sass and Marie Lasser and Ariel Wang, like being very considerate of how we're staying confined into in the story, despite this really easy opportunity to expand it beyond what we would do in the theater. So yeah,
keeping it in that bubble also, in a way, I think leans on the convention or the agreement that we have when we enter the theater, which is that suspension of disbelief.
mm-hmm.
And normally when you're working in this medium of film, you don't have that, because those worlds are built out. And so there is no suspension of disbelief, and there is no imagination, or at least the audience isn't asked to work to meet us halfway in this craft. And so it will be interesting to see if we can take the audience with us and say, remember that agreement that we had before? Can you come with us here, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's definitely a part of this pivot. This request, this ask of our audiences, an ask that we've always had, but feels just a little bit more, just a tad bit more necessary, because we're challenging their understanding of what it means to sit in front of a screen and watch a story play out. That is a convention that they're used to, but they're used to it in a very different way. And so now we're asking them to take the convention of theater that they're used to and think about it in a different way by putting it on their screens.
Yeah, and we want to hear them laugh or clap or respond. So that's going to be an interesting aspect of it, because usually they're part of the art making, an important part.
Yeah, there is this level to which it feels like, as I'm sort of prepping for Tech Week, is that it's gonna kind of, to a certain extent, feel like the show ends at the final dress, right? Like we do the final dress and then we're like, okay, that's it. Like there is this sort of, I mean, I don't know, all digital theater that I've seen this year has been tinged with this sense of tragedy. It's all been like, has had this aura of nostalgia and yearning for a world that we can't exist in. And I feel like I think that that's just kind of that's the case. It's just gonna have to be. That's the world that we live in right now. And I think the way in which I'm feeling that most directly is that sort of like, we'll have opening night. We're going to have this opening night party. There'll be this like cool Zoom thing. We're going to be doing like a Twitch Plays Pokemon thing. I don't know who's heard of Twitch Plays Pokemon in this room, but we're doing something very similar.
I'm going to look it up after this.
Twitch Plays Pokemon is such a cool social experiment. I want to talk to you about it in an unrelated thing, because it's one of the most interesting things that the internet has ever done. Fascinating piece of performance art.
But you know, to your point, Evelyn, about just the way that Zoom theater has kind of evolved, and for me, it manifests in the late show. Like I've made a habit out of watching the Late Show for a long time, and I was used to watching those monologues with a huge audience that would laugh and respond, and watching, you know, comedians like Stephen Colbert try to land a punchline with no laughter has been surreal. But I have also noticed that myself and my partner now laugh out loud more when we watch those things to fill in those gaps.
That's interesting.
So, yeah, so we're behaving differently, whereas before we would watch a comedy and we would never make a sound. We wouldn't like respond out loud because we didn't have to, because it was a screen, so like they wouldn't hear us. But but poor Steven just like feels like he needs someone to laugh at his jokes. And so I find myself doing that a lot more often now.
There was an interesting moment that happened in rehearsal earlier today where I was giving a note to one of the actors about like a run of a scene that we did, and another actor like jumped in and was just like, I need you to know that I was laughing hysterically back here.
Yeah.
Moment happened, and just like there was also a little bit of apprehension to share that information. I was like, all right, friends, we need to make it very clear for each other that if you were laughing at a moment and you want to share that with your colleague, please do that. Please tell them in the note session, because also part of Zoom, one of the problems is I can't even unmic myself to respond. Otherwise, I am cutting off the actors as they're going because there's no overlap opportunity. So they get no response at all throughout all of this. And I think there's something so affirming about just hearing that it landed. And if Stephen Colbert ever comes across this video, I'm sure that he will appreciate and feel affirmed knowing that you and Lindsay are laughing.
Or patronized.
Hi, Stephen. Love your work.
Thank you. So yeah, it is a very strange thing to go into a process like this and know that you're going to have the absence of something so important to like the way you understand your craft. But at the same time, you know that energy so well, like it's ingrained in you, that kind of energy. And hopefully, and it seems like we've been able to sustain ourselves with that energy that is just like now a part of us, that we've been able to sustain ourselves as we're building this project without audiences and in anticipation of not being able to have them ever as viscerally as we're used to. And so that's something also I'm really excited about, because once this gets going, our actors get to be audience. It's just something they've never really gotten to experience. That to me is kind of exciting, is that they get to feel that same joy that hopefully our audiences are feeling as well. Yeah, it's kind of cool.
Yeah, the first time that I performed and on any kind of film, I remember like watching it back and going like, wow. I had so many feelings. It's so strange.
I love acting for camera. I can never watch anything.
Yeah.
Like I was like in this really complicated and like short film that I was shooting for many months, and I still haven't seen it because I like hate watching myself on film so much.
Do you want me to watch it for you, Evelyn?
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's a personal thing.
As I've mentioned to the actors many a time, just today, I'm not an actor. I used to be really good, like really, really good. And then I stopped being good. I don't know what happened. Most actors get better over time, not for me. And so what's been really fascinating is to watch these actors kind of shift. I've seen all of them perform in a live setting where they are feeding off of response, and seeing them shift and have to kind of recalibrate what that experience is like is really fascinating. Some of them have done it before, and then others of them, this is like still a new experience. And every time I'm like, but you are so good. Like, you don't understand. You're really, really good at this. I know as someone who's not good at this, you're really good at this. It makes me just like that much more appreciative of the art of acting, that you can jump from mediums. It's fascinating. Anywho, I don't know if we're supposed to take questions or something, but we have 5 more minutes left.
Thank you, 5.
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask?
Yeah, maybe you could send us a message in the chat.
Yeah.
It's super quiet in there right now.
It is when you're just sitting here waiting. This is what it's like not to have an audience.
The audience is hypothetical.
Is anyone watching?
I was performing this show. I was mentioning it before we went live over in September, where I was reading for people as they were sleeping, that I would like people put on the live stream, and then I like read to them for 6 to 8 hours and sort of thought maybe I was influencing their dreams, or maybe it was helping them fall asleep. But it was this really odd experience of like it being 4:30 in the morning and having this book in front of me and like reading to this audience of people who are like a number on my screen, and most of them weren't hearing me. It was this really interesting level of like performing for this hypothetical person who I can't see or hear, but I know is receiving me in this sort of abstract and removed way. It's an odd way to perform.
Yes, but also like to think about your audience, yes, in an abstract way. I wonder if it like made you feel more connected, more valued in some way, to think about them abstractly like that.
I think that it made it feel like, I mean, like I was so if I I watch live streams to fall asleep a fair amount. Like I'll watch people play video games online to fall asleep. And one of the things that I've realized, like generally when I'm in my own house, I don't put on headphones. I like have it on next to me and I fall asleep and it's fine. But sometimes if I'm like at my parents' house and I'm like going to sleep, I'll put in earbuds so that I'm not disturbing anybody with the noise of it, because like video game noises just annoy people sometimes. And what I found is that if I fall asleep and I have earbuds in, then while I'm in the dream, I literally hear the things that are happening in the live stream. Like I hear the streamers' voices very distinctly.
Wow.
So there is this level to which I told people at the beginning of the stream, like, if you want the super intense experience, put in earbuds and I'll speak to you and you'll hear it in the dream. So there was this odd level, where I was reading and I was alone and it was 4:30 in the morning and there were a bunch of numbers on the screen, and yet I was closer to them than I could possibly have been if I had been performing it live. Like I was inside of their head in this way that would be impossible if I were on a stage and performing for people sitting awake in an audience. So it's this odd level of being simultaneously deeply removed and disconnected and incredibly intimately connected.
Wow. Well, if anybody is like 11 p.m. sleeper, we do have an 11 p.m. performance of D-Pad happening for the West Coast so that they can see at 8 p.m. But might as well maybe like listen to D-Pad in your sleep. Give it a try. That would be interesting. But yeah, that sounds really beautiful, Evelyn. Just having that like deeper connection, being like in their head. You are quite literally in their head, wearing earbuds, but to like let that seep into their psyche in an even deeper way is amazing. I'm going through a mind blown moment of what
one of the pieces of music that we tossed around when we were researching D-Pad was Max Richter's Sleep, which is a piece of music that is 8 hours long.
Yeah.
Very, very similar to
Love it.
what we were working on.
Durational theater. I mean, digital platforms are great for durational theater.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
They're really kind of made for it.
That is true. Yes, I will say that there was something, and maybe I'm making the relationship wrong, but there was something about going through Taylor Mack's 24-hour cycle durational theater. That's what clicked for me. And it was broken up into two 12-hour like pieces, parts. And doing all of that, there is something, the investment that you're giving to something for that length of time, whether it's in a theater or in your bed while you're sleeping, I think is a commitment to wanting to know what this person is going to share with you, or what these people are going to share with you. And the curiosity that is sparked as a human is it's exciting. And so you sharing that performance that you did, there's so much curiosity I have of what that what it means to perform that, and then also what it means to experience that. And I mean, to kind of circle it back to what we're doing at Theater Exile, there's got to be curiosity that people are feeling right now. Like, what is this actually going to be like? And hopefully that curiosity sparking them to invest and learn and come see the play. Yeah.
We got a comment from Denise. She said, thanks all for sharing your work here. It's been great to listen to creative new paths being forged.
Oh, thanks Denise.
Denise.
Well, with that lovely sentiment from Denise, we're at 8:30.
Okay.
So yeah, I feel like we're to wrap this up at this point. So I wrap this up with my authority as director of the play. But also, I just want to remind you all that single tickets for DPAD are now on sale. We are still selling subscriptions for the show, or not the show, but for the season. Up next after DPAD is Sin Eaters, but directed by Matt Pfeiffer. And yeah, I don't know. There's something curious about this season, and you should quench your curiosity. That's what I have to offer. Liz, Evelyn, thank you so very much.
Thank you.
I'm excited to continue our work on DPAD and the next steps and the journey that we are on. Yeah, thank you all so much.
Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.
Great talking to you both.